OOP's Coworker is an anti-making nightmare. I am not OOP. OOP originally wrote a letter to Allison Green, owner of Ask a Manager. Per her request, we have not copied her excellent advice, which can be found at the original links. Fun fact for the spoilers: sign language users have accents. New Yorkers sign faster than average and are more inclined to profanity. Southern ASL users sign slower, draw out signs, and touch their chin, chest more often. There's also a dialect called BASL, Black American Sign Language, which borrows from AAVE. Trigger warning: anti-mask and anti-vax sentiments, abusive coworker, sexual harassment mention, less than, mood spoiler. OOP comes out well in the end. Less than. January 25, 2021. My company implemented a mask policy. Everyone must wear a mask whenever they are outside of their own office cubicle. Back in May, and a state mask mandate went into effect in July. Both of those things are still active, and my coworker Bob is still the lone holdout on the mask rule. In addition to not wearing a mask, Bob also doesn't socially distance and often stands a feet or two away from me. Often so close to me that I can smell and feel his breath. Even before COVID, this was gross and annoying. He spends prolonged amounts of time inside my cubicle talking to me. About 1,530 minutes twice a day, and often leans even closer than normal to show me pictures on his phone of the grandkids. I have asked him to wear a mask around me. I have told HR, who works remotely, that Bob doesn't ever wear one, and they sent out a couple of company-wide reminder emails. I have told my boss, who also works remotely right now, that I feel unsafe with Bob's lack of compliance. So his manager had a chat with him. Bob now wears masks only when he sees his boss's car in the parking lot. His boss doesn't visit often, though, but he has still never followed the mask rules outside of that. Nothing has swayed him, and I have zero sympathy for his excuses. Just for the record, he does not claim to have a health condition or anything that prohibits mask wearing. He makes it clear he just doesn't want to, so he won't. If he is ever unknowingly contagious at the office, it's very likely that I and several other colleagues will get sick too, or at the very least, we will have to quarantine at home since we've been in close contact. At least one other coworker that I know of has complained to HR about the lack of masks, and nothing has changed. I hate that every day when I go into work I'm potentially exposing myself to the virus. I am not usually a direct person, and I admit I have never set a firm boundary with, "You cannot enter my cubicle without a mask," and then leaving my cubicle if he doesn't, or that kind of thing. I've only asked him to mask up near me and he has ignored me. So I've let it go with shocked silence. I'm going to try setting that boundary starting tomorrow when I'm in the office. But if that doesn't work, he has a history of ignoring my boundaries, so I'm not very hopeful. I'm out of ideas. HR has tried. My boss has tried. If me being extra direct doesn't work, am I wrong for considering telling my boss and HR that I'm not coming into the office again until he masks up? I can't do my full job from home. In fact, I'm supposed to be the token in-office person on my team so others can work from home. So it'd be quite the strong statement. Or am I overlooking some other option? I'm beyond tired of risking my health and my household's health because of my stubborn coworker. December 1st, 2021. First, thank you, Allison, for answering my question, and many thanks for the encouraging commenters on the original letter as well. The first part of my update I wrote in a comment in the original post, so some may have seen it already. But I have a lot more to add now too. The day after I wrote to Allison, in December 2020, before the letter was published, Bob walked into my cubicle and started talking. I gave Bob the firm boundary that he cannot come into my cubicle without a mask, and he also needed to stay 6 feet away. I reminded him where the free masks are in the office. Best case scenario, he could have put on a mask and finished the conversation. Just about the worst scenario happened. He argued heatedly for 10 or so minutes while I just kept repeating, "Okay. But you still need to wear a mask in my cubicle." I don't want to wear a mask. Everyone knows the mask rule isn't really a rule. I don't even have to wear a mask in Walmart. Why do I have to wear one here? It was so whiny. P.S. There was a state mask mandate then, so he, by law, absolutely did have to wear a mask in Walmart, which he apparently never did. That was eye-opening. I held my ground and maintained my boundary over and over, but he was horrid. When I reminded him for a second time that there are free masks in the office and he could go get one, he took a mask out of his pocket, dangled it in my face, and said through gritted teeth, "I have one, but you know why I'm not going to wear it? Because I don't want to. You can't make me. I work with a toddler." That's the nicest noun I can think of. I asked him to leave my cubicle if he wouldn't mask, and he refused again. So I told him I would get HR involved if he didn't leave and didn't comply with masking near me. Thankfully at this point he didn't know I'd already talked to HR several times and they'd done nothing, and HR was working remotely that day as usual. He left while grumbling, "I didn't know you were one of those people. And, if that's how you want to play it." I was shaken up after. But the next day that I saw him, he did wear a mask for a second just to drop something off at my desk. A victory. The next week, he made a comment about being offended that I didn't thank him for wearing a mask. The man was offended at my lack of gratitude. Let's let that sink in. I pretended I hadn't heard his comment and said nothing. I had absolutely nothing professional to say, and getting visibly angry would just prove to him that he didn't have to take me seriously because I'm too emotional or whatnot. He's been largely ignoring me ever since, which is seriously a great improvement to my work environment. He did mask somewhat for a little bit after my confrontation. Maybe for a couple weeks? By somewhat masking, I mean he was holding up a mask to his face with one hand. Like not putting the ear loops on and just breathing through his mask and his hand. He looks absurd when he does that. After a bit of time seeing that, in late January 2021, with new advice from Allison and commenters, thank you, and with the support of 2 other coworkers that I broached about this, we sent an email to HR and my boss to tell them that Bob consistently wasn't masking properly and that we were all uncomfortable about being exposed to the virus. HR asked me to monitor him for a week and get back to them if he was still just holding the mask up to his mouth. I wasn't thrilled about being asked to monitor him, but I did and sent an update. AKA he wasn't masking. Surprise. HR said they'd handle it. He did wear a mask for a while after that, sometimes fully masked, sometimes somewhat masked. But HR seemed to be okay with his somewhat masking method, even though I continued to complain about that. Sigh. Then the vaccine came. In April 2021, our mask rule at work went away for vaccinated people. And my company made it a rule that you can't ask someone about their vaccine status at work, so if someone wasn't masking, no one knew if they were vaccinated or just choosing not to comply. Bob has anti-vaccine rants with a like-minded coworker in the hallways. But I had to pretend that he was vaccinated. According to HR, he began not masking at all again during this time. Conveniently in May it seemed the pandemic was over. My state and office no longer required masks. I thought I'd finally dodged the Bob bullet. In August, our mask rule appeared again in response to a steep rise in cases. Everyone else was wearing masks in the office as required. Bob was usually not even pretending to half wear a mask anymore. He just wasn't. I was exhausted of emailing HR at this point, so I let it go for a time. I know. I shouldn't have. I should have continued being the squeaky wheel. But I was worn out and felt I had no squeaks to give. Only when I had a client visit the office in early October, the first office visitor in a while, did I realize how unfair he was being to everyone. Unfair in so many ways. I had to instruct client to wear a mask in the building as required. And client kindly obliged. Bob has mildly traumatized me, and I was bracing myself for an incident when I asked client to mask up. But client is a normal person who masks when asked to. Even though I know client preferred not to wear a mask. Human decency, astonishing, isn't it? Client saw Bob walking around the hallways unmasked. Nothing was said, of course. But I was rightfully embarrassed that I had to make them follow a rule when he doesn't have to. And angry that HR has seen this and let us down with how they handled it. So I wrote to HR again, with my most firm language. I used words like, extremely disappointed this behavior is allowed to continue, and called Bob's behavior ugly and disrespectful in a huge way, and not reflective of our company values. I reiterated that allowing Bob's behavior to continue puts me at risk of being exposed to an unvaccinated person, and that a quarantine for me means great stress for the rest of my team since they'd have to do my work. I requested that we either begin to enforce the mask rule or we take the mask rule away to reflect reality. I knew they would stand by their rules, so then they'd be forced to say they'd take enforcement seriously. And I was right. HR told me no one is above the rules. Even Bob. They also claimed to only see Bob when masked, somewhat masked, and acted totally shocked that he hadn't been masking. Historically, he usually does try to hold a mask over his face if he knows HR is in the building, so I half believe that. I don't totally believe that because I still have seen HR and an unmasked Bob together at the same time a handful of times, and they claimed they never saw him unmasked, and we all know holding a mask to his face while walking around all day is still not proper mask wearing. So I'm not sure why he got away with even that. I don't know what was said to him, but he has fully masked consistently the last few weeks since. I hope they threaten to fire him at long last, as they should with anyone who has willfully chosen to disobey an important rule for over a year. After many reminders and conversations, my boss's boss also apologized to me directly about their previous lack of handling the issue and promised it'd be different going forward. I accepted the apology and also politely told him it was a necessary apology. I will hold him to his promise. So far, this is a happy ending. But if I never have to send an email regarding masks again, it will be too soon. I have seen so much ugly and I can't go back. Stay healthy and stay squeaky, everyone. September 14th, 2022. I wrote to you last year about a non-masking coworker, and wanted to provide a second happy update, if I may. First, I wanted to say thank you for publishing my question, for your advice, and for the encouragement from the commenters. The AAM community is a great one. Many comments expressed a sentiment something like this: why on earth is OP's company allowing this behavior for so long? What kind of place is this? Yeah, I'm with you. As one might have guessed, the non-masking dysfunctional coworker and the slow response from HR was a symptom of the larger dysfunction at my company. I truly loved that industry and the clients, and I'd become friends with a couple colleagues. But the dysfunction and stress were taking too high a toll. I am happy to say I started a new job a couple months ago. Bob wasn't the reason I decided to leave, but leaving all that behind was certainly a value add. Bob always had a big streak of dysfunction that made my work life difficult. The mask thing was in no way my first or last conflict with him. It was just the only issue that I brought to HR. Regular sexist comments despite my attempts to shut it down. Spreading rumors about me. And extreme offense at anything and nothing were all the norm with Bob. He was at times downright hostile, personally attacking people with uncalled for comments at even the slightest perceived issue. For me, the kicker, other than the mask incident, was after I put in my notice. He asked for my home address and personal email address so he could stay in contact and send me a goodbye present, which he has done for at least one other departing staff that I know of, who notably was also a young woman my age. I definitely did not feel comfortable giving out my personal info to him. He was highly offended and frustrated. Sent me long emails when I wouldn't, and he asked again. When I firmly said no again via email, he sent me a pouting face emoji. That was right before I clocked out on my last day. Bye, Bob. I had also started having panic attacks. Brand new for me. At work. Cue a few COVID scares where I became quite ill. But I later realized it was all stress manifesting as illness. Also a first for me. Oh, I was pressured by management to work at home while sick and not take any sick time. Even once when I had a false positive COVID test, which I didn't know was false yet, and felt very ill. Seeing Allison advocating for managers to encourage their employees to take time off if they have COVID was eye-opening. I'd forgotten how toxic my job was. Probably unsurprisingly, the last time I had a panic attack was my last day of work there. I was very honest and matter-of-fact about what I'd experienced in my exit interview. At my new job, things of course aren't perfect, but it's wildly better. I am still recovering from the burnout and all the rest of it. But most days I actually like my job. Plus, I work with wonderful people. I've identified a few things at my new company that have made a huge difference for me. 1. There aren't people here who make me worry for my safety. People follow CDC guidelines and they don't sexually harass me. Having routine sexual harassment training and other training on how to have respectful coworker interactions have probably helped. At least then no one has the excuse of not knowing professional norms. The excuse everyone gave Bob. And no, old company did not ever do harassment training. 2. Leadership has listened to the workload concerns on my team and are actively looking for solutions and hiring. 3. Overtime hours are allowed during exceptionally busy times and they pay you for the extra hours without complaint or resentment. My boss actually wrote me a thank you note after the crazy week when I worked overtime. While I didn't expect or need to be thanked, it felt great. Your blog has given me the courage I needed time and time again to stand up for myself at work. Reminder that I am not the OOP. And you have a right to call out assholes who are endangering your health. Lead was a little buried here. Yes, the anti-masker, anti-vaxxers were bad, but then casually dropping sexual harassment. I hope someone is squeaky enough to legally nuke this workplace. This is absolutely nuts. Thankfully I worked somewhere who had good rules on masks, but was dysfunctional with everything else. I mean, sending messages on my day off after midnight, calling my mother, demanding so many things, and the pay was awful. I now work somewhere else that pays better. They all voted for Bolsonaro. Though, you can't get everything, I guess. Fuck Bob and everyone like him. I've been an ICU nurse for over 15 years. Between 20,202,021 I zipped more body bags shut than I had in my entire career before that. I watched a 70-year-old vaccinated woman die because her asshole relative wasn't vaccinated and wouldn't wear a mask around her. She was on immunosuppressants for a transplant, and this was before the boosters were approved. The first person I saw die from COVID was a 30-something-year-old father. It just blows my mind how differently everyone handled COVID. We had a curfew and weren't allowed to be outside of our zones. Grocery stores only allowed one person per household. And if you had an anti-masker at work, you would get slapped with a massive fine for dangerous work practices. I think Bob is a great metaphor for the overall inappropriate or even downright malicious behavior that we allow obliquely in the interest of the potentially unhinged being coddled. It shows just how harmful that really can be. Microaggressions can kill over time. Especially not rocking the boat with vaguely threatening, entitled men of a certain age. I had no squeaks to give. That's so cute and sad. I still wear a mask everywhere. The only people who ask me about it are some of the really young elementary school kids with whom I volunteer. I just say I have a little cough and want to keep them safe and healthy. Bob's denial of pandemic measures, vaccine, masking, is frustrating for everyone else. People like Bob think they are the silent majority when really everyone else looks at them like two heads and wants to avoid confrontation, like the HR person. I have never been happier to live in Massachusetts than I was in 20,202,021. Not a single person said a single goddamn thing to me about a mask. I wanna bet the reason he didn't want to wear mask is because his breath stinks so much he would have to breathe in his stinky breath if he masked up. Haven't even read the post yet, but the typo in the headline is killing me with laughter. I was so genuinely confused about what this coworker was unmaking or against being made. I was re-entering the workforce during COVID. I got hired by a Fortune 100 company to walk around their campus all day and remind people to wear their mask properly. It was a hell job. I had a lovely work partner who had worked there before and helped me navigate the company. There I was, an older, overweight woman of color telling people who had worked there for years in construction. The company had a lot of ongoing construction projects to pull up their masks while they were outside in 100 degrees temps. People with Trump stickers. People who hated me for existing and thought I was less than. We were forced into professional politeness, but their disdain for me was apparent. Thing is, it was literally my job. The reason I was hired. If they had a problem with policy, arguing with me wasn't going to change that. The rules came from the top. The company was trying to save their lives and they resented the hell out of me for it. Basically every time I read Ask a Manager. I'm so grateful that I work from home and have been working from home for close to a decade. I know that my boss and most of my coworkers were aggressive anti-maskers, but they were many states away from me, so it was fine. Turns out there's a lot of toxic behavior that you can overlook for a paycheck, and it's much easier when you're not in the same room. I wore a mask on a recent trip to the dentist and have done so in the doctor's office. I've overheard people make comments such as, "Some people think COVID's still a thing," etc. Well, my husband caught it last week. I made him isolate within the home and I didn't catch it. Excuse me for not wanting to put up with a virus when I've got enough stress in my life, including two unvaccinated under 5s to look after and not wanting to infect other people. We're still averaging 10 deaths per week in my state. How many people clicked on this post to figure out what anti-making was? Wild people recognize how messed up this was but don't wear a respirator with 1 in 10 COVID infections leading to long COVID and 13,000 confirmed deaths per week just in the US. Please wear a mask. KN95. Not surgical. In public to protect yourself. your loved ones, and strangers like me who will die if they get COVID. If you stopped, it's never too late to start caring again. I can only hope fools like Bob continue to Darwin themselves so the rest of us don't have to put up with them endangering our health too. Trigger warning for anti-mask and anti-vax sentiments. Who woulda thunk it? As soon as Oop said Bob would stand close enough to smell his breath, I figured he was a sexual harasser. I would have pulled my phone out and just openly recorded him every time he came near me, and forwarded every single video to HR and openly CC'd my employment lawyer. It would have lasted exactly 1 day.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.